Welcome to SUSD Spotlight, your go-to source for all things happening within the district. Whether it's celebrating student and staff achievements, delving into trending education topics, or highlighting inspiring human interest stories, we've got you covered. Join us as we illuminate the incredible endeavors taking place in our schools and forge connections within our community. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and engaged as we embark on this journey together, spotlighting the extraordinary in SUSD. Welcome to another edition of SUSD Spotlight. Today we welcome in the studio former SUSD student, Rabbi Adam Zagoria-Moffet, and we're looking forward to hearing about your journey. So welcome today. And
thank you. Good to be here. Good to be back.
So you say good to be back. Back from where?
Well, for me, most recently, back is from the UK. I live in England now, as I suspect you can hear a little bit, although it doesn't sound that way to me. And I've been there for 7 years, so I haven't been back to Scottsdale for a long time, actually. I haven't lived here since I graduated.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your SUSD journey, when you started in school and your trajectory through our Scottsdale system.
Well, I moved to Arizona in elementary school, so I started at Laguna Elementary when I was in 4th or 5th grade, must have been. And through there went to Mountainside, and from Mountainside over the road to Desert Mountain. So I graduated from Desert Mountain in 2007.
Okay. And going through our system, did you always know that you had an interest in becoming a rabbi at some point? Or
Not at all.
When did that revelation become clear to you?
Well, it was a revelation to me as well, in many senses of the word. If you went back and asked me when I was at Desert Mountain whether I would be here sitting talking about this in such a way now, and that my life would have taken the course it did, I never would have anticipated it. It was a surprise to me in many ways, and lots of steps along the way that started perhaps during my time here in Scottsdale and during my education, and kind of grew as I went further on in education in university and elsewhere, to change the course of my life in many ways.
So when you left Desert Mountain, where did you go?
So I went to university or college, as it might be, in Minnesota, a small private liberal arts college called Hamlin.
Okay.
And then from there, after graduating, went to New York City, where I trained to be a rabbi at the Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan.
And how long does that training take?
Well, after college, it's another 6 years for me. So 10 years of college all in. And then you finally get to go out in the working force, usually long time after you expected, because it's a lot of learning. But it makes sense for the role of being a rabbi that you would have to do a lot of learning.
Sure, absolutely. And did you start doing some of that work here, or did you immediately go from finishing your degree to the UK?
I went immediately to the UK. And for me, I looked at positions all around the world, and basically you get a list of any synagogue hiring a rabbi in the world. And partially I wasn't that attached to staying in America. I was open to going anywhere, so interviewed in Canada, Australia, the UK, and here, although not in Phoenix. And it was just a wonderful place to live. I mean, I live in St. Albans, that's where I work.
Okay.
And most people probably won't know it, but it's a small town about an hour outside of London. And it's great. It's got a lot of history. It's accessible to London, but it's also really close to the countryside. You kind of get everything. It's a really nice place to live. I feel very spoiled to live there.
So Desert Mountain High School is also home to our International Baccalaureate program. So I wondered if that global perspective had any influence on sort of your journey abroad.
Absolutely. I mean, I think like most Americans, when you're growing up, you don't think that much about the rest of the world, right? It's a bit of a stereotype, but it's also true. America is such a big country, and there's so much in it, and there's so much diversity that, in essence, you kind of have everything you need. Most Americans don't have a passport still, I think, and most don't necessarily have much of a global consciousness about the world. I certainly didn't when I was growing up. And IB was a huge part of that for me, because it forced us to think about global issues, to think about any issue we face in a global context. And so I don't know that I would have realized it then, but I think it changed the way I perceive the world very fundamentally.
So from a student perspective, what are the kinds of things that you think about? You're in the spiritual leadership role now, but thinking about our students, the challenges they're navigating, your experience in our system, what are the things you think are most relevant for our students to be contemplating as they navigate the challenges in 2024?
Well, it's a hard time to be a student, I think. And the expectation of previous generations that you kind of have this certain track to your life. You graduate high school, you go to college, you get a good job, you buy a house. It's just not true anymore. And I think we need to be honest with kids about that, because kids certainly feel it. And the kids that I meet and talk to around the world, certainly in the UK and probably here as well, they have a real sense of I don't know what the word is, ennui, just kind of
Right.
meh, right? They're just really unsure about what the future holds. And I think giving a sense of hope, of showing that there are lots of ways to have a life that one wants, even if it's not the conventional story that was sold to previous generations, is still accessible. I think that's really important. That's what, for me, I think probably saved me in many ways in high school.
And identifying your path. Not everybody knows exactly what they want to be when they grow up. It's a journey. And so how is it that you came to where you are today?
Well, it's very unlikely, and most good journeys are, I think, that, you couldn't have, if you were betting on it, you wouldn't have bet that it would come out this way, or at least I wouldn't have. It would be bad odds. But for me, when I was in high school, I started to have contact with the Jewish community here locally in Scottsdale for the first time. I didn't really grow up in the Jewish community. I didn't have a bar mitzvah. I wasn't going to synagogue as a child. It wasn't something that was part of my life. But I started working for Chabad of Scottsdale.
Okay.
And they in many ways kind of saved my life, because they kind of, at a key moment in my life when I was really finding myself struggling with many of the challenges a lot of teenagers do, but especially growing up in quite a poor white family in a very affluent, Desert Mountain can be overwhelmingly in your face sometimes. It's hard to be in a different socioeconomic bracket when you're living in that area. And Chabad, the Jewish community that I encountered there, just really gave me a sense of family and connection and depth, really, right? Seeing that there's more to life, that things are perhaps worth asking the big questions about the nature of the universe, the soul, all the stuff that, when kids usually ask about, adults dismiss them for. I think those are the things that helped me to explore my path, was being able to ask questions.
And because life can be so stressful, and especially for a student trying to find their way, it's about finding community. Or what would you advise students now grappling with some of these very same issues?
I think it's about exploring things that might surprise you, that you don't realize that you'll enjoy. I had no intention when I started that job that I would be involved in the Jewish community. It's just a job, but it completely transformed my sense of myself. So I think being open to that, right? Not prejudging experiences that come your way, and being willing to try things that even seem completely contrary to what you'd expect, you can really be surprised. And the problem is adults are often really smug about it, right? Because the adults and the parents will say, oh, well, I told you so, and that makes it so much worse. But if kids can get past that and just actually enjoy the opportunity, which you only really have when you're young, to just explore stuff and try stuff and see what happens, it can really surprise you. You never know what's out there that might change your own life.
So when you think about your experiences here in Scottsdale and now in the UK, what are some of the similarities and differences that you think are relevant or important to point out?
I mean, it feels like it's mostly differences, to be honest. Each time I come back, it feels a bit stranger. But there's also something very familiar about being here. And it's nice to be here now. And my son is 10, and being able to show him, this is where we grew up. And, it's really fun for me. But the differences are profound culturally. Well, I mean, one of the big ones is around religion in schools and education. In the UK, there's no separation of church and state, which means that religion is required to be learned in school. You might think that means because it's a Christian country, you only learn about Christianity, but actually most schools teach about all sorts of religion. And so religious literacy is a huge part of British culture. I'm often speaking to schools as part of my job. I go in and visit schools and talk to them about Judaism, and I have schools come visit me at the synagogue. That's a huge difference. I think one of the things I would have loved to have more exposure to as a kid was just learning about religion. Right. Especially in a world where religion informs so much of how people behave. 80% of the people in the world have some religion. It's something that our anxiety about kind of never the twain shall meet actually sometimes prevents us from getting to understand it better and just studying it. And IB was also part of that. We studied religion, I remember, and it was the first time that it felt like it was okay to just kind of look and compare and discuss, and in a somewhat objective way. And those skills are huge for being a global citizen, which is what IB is all about. You have to understand how people think and what motivates them.
And it helps build bridges, helps us connect in ways that religion becomes an important part of people's lives, in many people's lives, not everyone's. But if we don't have space to have those conversations, then oftentimes that leads to not being able to really connect and know people.
Yeah, the alternative is much worse. Yes. I think people are afraid if we talk about it. It's one of those things where it's kind of polite not to talk about religion and politics, right? But actually, if we don't talk about it, it tends to be much worse. Right. Because usually when you do talk about it, you find that people are genuinely curious. And if you can do so in a non-judgmental way, where you can really just survey how important religion is in people's lives, even without making that about forcing it on anyone, obviously, it gives a great deal of skills for young people entering the world and thinking about why people do the things they do. Who are the people who they
Right,
might
right.
encounter, and what are they thinking about? How do they understand the world around them? It matters.
No, I think it's fascinating. And speaking of journeys, when you talked about not expecting where your journey would take you, I actually went to school and have a degree in biblical studies and thought mine was going to take me in a different path, and I'm a superintendent. So
look at that.
Again, the
Crossed
doors
over
that
somewhere
open.
in the middle.
Exactly. Opportunity to serve people is how I see it.
Yeah.
And in this case, serving the students in our community. We like to celebrate our legacies of success. We have students from Scottsdale Unified that are doing amazing things, impacting communities for good. It's clear that you're doing that in your community across the pond. I'm interested in whether or not you have any stories of inspiration, a teacher or an experience in school that kind of inspired you, something that we could lift up as a celebration.
Well, there's lots, actually, and I was reflecting back on it because I don't think that much about my time, I suppose, in high school. But the thing that really sticks in my mind, and a shout out to a long-time Scottsdale teacher, who I think is just retired, Tom Vining, who was
yes.
physics teacher at Desert Mountain for a long time. I was in the pre-IB program, but I actually didn't do the IB the second 2 years, and it's because I wanted to take physics. And you could only take biology or chemistry at the time. There was kind of arcane rules about it. So I was a IB dropout, actually, and was doing so because I really wanted to take physics. That was what I thought I wanted to do with my life at the time. I was convinced I was going to go to university to study science, to become an astronomer, and Mr. Vining was a big part of that in many ways. And part of what he taught was not actually about physics, because it turns out it wasn't for me.
Right.
I couldn't crack it at the math, and I didn't really enjoy the technical side of it as much as I thought. I liked the big questions, right? The sense of awe and wonder, but I didn't actually like the mechanics of sitting there at a computer for hours entering data into a table. But Mr. Vining showed, and I think many students will attest, that you can have a great deal of humor in dealing with science, right? And that you can ask big questions, and it has to be something which you have a certain degree of lightness about. I mean, there's always kind of pulling pranks in class and coming up with these elaborate schemes to get students to get involved. And, one of my fondest memories at Desert Mountain was that part of our course, there was an astrophysics course that you could take in your senior year, which I think was cross-listed with Scottsdale Community College. And a big part of the course was showing up at Desert Mountain at 1 a.m. for observations. And I remember, my class and sitting there on the hood of the car, laying out, looking at the stars and taking notes. And, to me, that was a huge moment, both of being able to explore something that interested me, astronomy and astrophysics, realizing it wasn't quite for me, but still having the environment to play with it, to be playful. And I think that's what I remember most about Mr. Vining. And I think that's something that good teachers tend to have, is a sense of lightness about it. You don't take it quite so seriously. And that demonstrates to students that they can also play with it a little bit and allow themselves to explore it a little bit. And there's something really nice about that.
No, I think that's really important.
To make it fun, engaging, and somehow relatable.
Yeah.
To whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, and to show it's not all or nothing, right? I think a lot of kids, there's so much pressure on them to decide exactly what they're going to do, and they have to go this way or that way, and they have to know. And adults always come up to them and ask them, well, what are you going to do with your life? And it's this incredible amount of pressure, and actually validating the experience of just being okay messing around in a positive sense, in an educational sense, playing and exploring is really good.
Well, we talk a lot about mindfulness, and I'm thinking about laying on the hood of a car looking up at the stars and how contemplative you could be in that moment.
I mean, we were 17, so I'm not sure we were as contemplative as we should have been, but I definitely feel like it left an impact that goes way beyond just that experience of class.
But those experiences, those memories, those recollections are things that oftentimes when you're going through the high school years, you don't understand the importance. So I appreciate your willingness to celebrate Mr. Vining and the way that he created that opportunity. I love the awe and wonder focus. I always hope for our students that it's about learning so many new and different things and not pigeonholing themselves into any one trajectory, but being open to what future possibilities might be. And I think you're a great testimony to what those opportunities might be that you never would have contemplated when you were in school.
And that's part of our legacy of success, is celebrating the different pathways that our former students take in life, hoping that they might also inspire our current students. Dr. Menzel, you have a little something in front of you.
I do. So one of the things that I carry these around in my pocket. So wherever I find an SUSD graduate, I like to present them with an SUSD legacy pin, because we are so grateful for the legacy that you're carrying on and representing our community and the things that we're able to do in terms of impacting the world for good.
Thank you. Well, it might be the first one to be worn in St. Albans, England.
In all likelihood, but one day maybe there'll be more.
Maybe.
We need pins on a map
Yes,
so we
exactly.
can recognize where our legacy of success has all landed.
I must be all around the world, and it's really nice to be able to connect my journey with my beginnings in Scottsdale. I haven't thought about it quite the way that we did this morning, so thank you.
We appreciate you being here with us today and would ask, do you have any final reflections or words of advice for our students before we conclude this interview?
I guess, based on what we've talked about this morning, I'd say don't close yourself off to things, right? Don't look at something and think, oh, that's not for me, whether it's because you think you know what it is or whether someone you know does it and you think that's not my thing, or whether your parents say you should do it and so you go, oh, no, I can't. Whatever it is, just don't shut the door on anything, I think, because you really don't know where those doors might lead and which ones you might find yourself walking through. And often it can surprise you in the best possible way. And I think it's something I found in many people that have celebrated their life's journeys, is that when you ask them about how they got there, they have a sense of curiosity themselves. They don't really know,
Right.
Just a series of unlikely events sometimes. And for that to happen, you've got to leave yourself open to it happening in the first place.
Well, that is really great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today. And that will conclude this session. We invite you to join us on this exciting podcasting journey anytime or place that suits you. Tune into Spotlight as we shine a light on the extraordinary stories that make the Scottsdale Unified School District a truly exceptional place.
And please take a moment to pitch us your ideas for future episodes. We look forward to hearing from you on our website at susd.org/spotlight.